already done in this area by the Russian companies, how to get this recognized by the government and the international community, and what are the sustainable development requirements that their consumers can have towards businesses, and what role should Russian regions play in the sustainable development agenda. Our roundtable has representatives of the public governance, academic science, and big businesses. During this discussion, we will try to find answers to these and other questions relevant for ESG transformation. And I now give the floor to my co-moderator, Zhana Belaeva, Academic Director of Graduate School of Economics and Management at the Ural Federal University. So who is driving ESG transformation in Russia? Is it the government or the business? And how does Ural Federal University play a role in this process? Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you very much, Pavel. And I'm happy that we have this discussion on ESG at this venue, although these three letters, ESG, are still not very popular. So over the past 2 months, there have been maybe 50 events in Russia that are devoted in some respect to this subject, ESG and sustainability. So how do we, academic institutions, play a role in this agenda? I have several slides and I will try to discuss the general picture with their help. So when we're talking about sustainable development, especially over university, we are always speaking about big mathematical models that were suggested by the experts from the Roman clock 50 years ago. And when they developed these models, it became clear that the resources we are currently using will no longer be sufficient for the next 50 years. But most interestingly, when these experts issued, the Roman Club experts issued their report several years ago before the pandemic, they were addressing the issues of what are we going to do next? Should we stop this consumption? Should we rethink the sustainable development agenda? I think now you will be able to hear me much better, both in this room and beyond. Well, maybe it was some kind of spy activity, because the Roman Club is not usually widely discussed, but we can participate in this agenda now. So the World Economic Forum is discussing interesting global risks that have to do not only with the pandemic, but also with the development of the consuming society. And they also developed the so-called sustainability trends. Who are driving these processes? Firstly, it's industry-specific metrics, what industry players can do. Secondly, it's transparency. And if we used to have lots of greenwashing in the past, but now it's very difficult to conceal the effects from external stakeholders. Thirdly, it's localizing. We don't have a big global market, and due to the laws adopted in the European Union, the so-called package of green laws, we need to look at the Russian, not only the global market. I will not dwell on what ESG is. I hope that we are also joined by market participants who are only beginning to look at this agenda. And we, of course, we have discussed with the experts that it's not about just using this beautiful acronym to call what we are already doing. So what is ESG? Is it about the environment, the social action, or should we pay more attention to governance, corporate governance, cybersecurity, and economics? Most probably, the Sustainable Development Assessment is an attempt of assessing and hedging global risks for a company, both at the macro and the micro level. Moving on. All over the world, the key regulator is, in fact, the state, the government. And this slide shows how central banks participate in this process in different countries and how financial regulators are driving the market more and more. This also shows that the government, even though we read a lot about the business being the key player implementing the ESG agenda in Russia and in other countries. It's not exactly true. Until we have clear tools from the government, neither the public nor the business know how to develop in a structured manner. Universities are impact hubs and they connect experts from the real market, students who are future managers, and the government. At least we would really love to play that role. So who of these players is shaping the agenda? That's what we are going to find out. But now we already have a request from the society, maybe less so in Russia, that this is actually about funding. And investors are no longer working with the companies not included in ESG rankings. We can say that regulators are only setting the rules, and that's also a prerequisite for greenwashing. Is it so? I would really love to hear our experts' opinion about this. So is it just about performance indicators? Is it good to be at the top of ESG market? Or does this have to do with the mindset, with understanding what's behind the indicators? And regulators are shaping the agenda and they're shaping the legal framework. But we have a big cross-cultural framework here, and millennials from different countries respond to that in different ways. There is a good study by PricewaterhouseCoopers that in big investments, that not only millennials participate in big investments and impact investments, because there is a widespread opinion that millennials were born with a mobile phone in hands and with a sustainable mindset. But unfortunately, this is not true. And this means that we need to look at impact investment myths in more detail. And so one of the myths says that impact investments are only for exchange-traded companies or big businesses. Another myth is that it's only interesting for exporters, that this is just a fashion buzzword among millennials, and also that it costs a lot. So let's rather discuss the opportunities of responsible investment. I will not dwell on each of these bullet points, but I think it's very important to mention that those who are shaping the sustainable mentality and the understanding of why we need all that, these are actually universities. And for instance, the Ural Federal University issued its first non-financial ESG report, where we measure on how our students can make responsible projects, not only, so it's not only talking the talk, but also walking the walk, as the English phrase goes. So students are doing real projects, and this makes us believe that in the future we are going to develop these sustainable ecosystems together. And of course, if the universities, the business, the government, and the big players are not working together, we will not be able to achieve a shared vision. And it's definitely clear that everyone has their own interests, and we would like to perceive the sustainable development in Russia at the time as a coral reef with some sharks and some individual players who cannot exist without each other. And I give the floor back to Pavel. I'm sure I've raised lots of issues, and I would like to hear back from practitioners with the answers. Thank you for these points, Jean, and I will now introduce the experts of the roundtable who will partially answer these questions. Dennis Pakin, Sustainable Development Manager, Private Meteorological Company. Andrei Volchik, Deputy Chair, Ural Bank of Sberbank. Hans Wilsmith, President, Saxon Academy of Sciences, Professor Emeritus of Economics at Technical University of Dresden, Germany. Svetlana Grishenkova, Managing Director, RIEX Europe International Ranking Agency. Yegor Svalov, Deputy Minister of Energy and Utilities of the Sverdlovsk Oblast. Diana Kansafarova, Executive Vice President, Sverdlovsk Oblast Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs. Ilya Gars, Corporate Citizenship Lead, IBM Russia and CIS. Ksenia Klimko, Senior Manager, Project and Infrastructure Funding Group at PricewaterhouseCoopers in Russia. Rob Versman, Training and Development Manager at Gazprom International in the Netherlands. Alberto Ferraris, Associate Professor, Management Department at University of Turin, Italy, Sergei Litvinenko, Chair of the Board, Union of Waste Recycling Enterprises of the Ural Federal District and Director General at Etilamin Yeka, Igor Danilov, Director General, Ural Exhibition Center, and Maria Kapustina, Head of International Events Directorate, Ural Exhibition Center, and Alexei Dushin, Rector, Ural Mining University. I would like to give the floor first to Ksenia Klimko, Senior Manager, Project and Infrastructure Funding Group at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Russia. So, Ksenia, please tell us how the strategy of Soviet development reflects the principles of the green economy. Colleagues, good afternoon, everyone. I wanted first to thank organizers for this opportunity of participating in this event. And I'm also greeting all participants of this conference. Thank you very much for the question. I will now share my slides. What I wanted to show you today, and I wanted to talk to you about the first letter of this widely discussed acronym, ESG, and this is the environment, and how regions and why regions need to strive to the transformation of their economy, and particularly the green economy transformation. I'll talk about how we can build these green environmental aspects into our processes and why it is important. We will discuss not only the approaches, but also a specific example in the Sverdlovsk Oblast that's currently developing a strategy of the region's social and economic development until 2035. And this strategy is based on 5 concepts, one of which is green economy. And I wanted to start with a few slides by way of an introduction. So why should regions be thinking about it? As colleagues have already mentioned, regions can create certain benchmarks, and a strategy is a benchmark that shows what the regional administration is going to do, what regional leaders are striving for, and it's also a benchmark for potential investors. And those parameters and targets that the region is defining are also important for foreign investors. So this is also a benchmark for the local business, what we are striving to, where the region as a whole is moving. Transforming the economy is not a task for 1 or 2 companies. All stakeholders need to be involved here, all regional stakeholders. And we need to understand that untimely response to this actively developing environmental agenda and maintaining the as-is scenario can entail a number of threats that will occur in the next 5 or 10 years. These threats are primarily associated with decline of the population, worse health of the population, freeing up some workers employed in brown industries who were not able to find their place in the new agenda, including high-skilled workers. And this is a threat for the region, a threat that highly qualified professionals will leave for other cities and countries. And this also means a potential reduction of export and foreign trade volumes. Everyone has already heard about the future cross-border adjustment tax in the European Union, but other partner countries are discussing similar measures as well, not only the EU. And foreign consumers are now having strict requirements to their vendors, which reduces the region's the export potential of regional product in foreign markets. Many regions are actually dependent on the export of its product nowadays. And another threat has to do with investors. It's true that lenders and investors, as they analyze projects, regions, and companies, are starting to apply ESG criteria. In the future, we can expect that the cost of capital of fundraising for public companies, this will be much higher for companies that are not green. And a few words here about all these threats that we were now discussing. These threats actually mean that the as-is scenario is no longer viable, and we need a transformation of the economy from the traditional conventional model we are now living in to the green economy concept. And I'll just spend a few minutes, some time, to say what the green economy actually is, because there is no shared opinion about the definition of this term, and everyone understands something different. Firstly, it's the principle of a cyclic economy. That's reusing resources and products as much as possible and minimizing the waste buried waste burial grounds. Also, it's conscious and sensible consumption, not only by companies, but also by the population. As I said, all stakeholders need to be included. This is a low carbon economy. This is orientation on long-term growth, and not only at our well-being, but also the well-being of future generations. And what's particularly important for me as a person who is dealing with investments and fundraising is the mechanisms and stimuli that make environmental a part of cost-effective projects, because we realize that green environmental projects mean additional costs for the business, but we need measures and mechanisms that not only entail additional capital expenditure, but those that would give companies access to cheaper funding, give them access to additional sales markets and clients. And here, it's important to note when we are now working on the strategy of the Sverdlovsk region, this is a story of cascading the big global trends to the regional level. And eventually, the specific decisions, solutions, and projects will be implemented in regions, and the regional government cannot ignore these big trends. I will probably give a simple example here. Again, the Sverdlovsk region has a lot of export, and more than 50% of this export goes to the European Union, China, and the US. And all these countries are now developing measures on introducing the carbon quota trading and cross-border carbon adjustment tax, and so on. The region, which is a counterparty dealing directly with other countries, cannot avoid responding to these new developments and regulating measures, or the region will lose its potential revenue. And the answer to these questions and these threats that may seem quite frightening to the region, the answer is integrating the green economy in its strategic targets, as the government of the Sverdlovsk Oblast did. We need to understand that the concept of the green economy is not a thing in itself. It's a pretty specific sequence of steps, and as we work on the concept of the green economy of the Sverdlovsk Oblast, we made most of these steps. First of all, we need to identify the priorities, taking into account the specific features of the region. You cannot just use a cookie-cutter approach for all regions. we need to define the tasks and objectives and goals that are relevant for the regional businesses. These are the indicators that the business will look at whether this is important for the region or not, and what goals we want to achieve within the next 15 years. The next step is converting these targets into green projects. Excuse me, 1 minute, please. Yes, thanks. I think that will be enough. Thank you. And another important step here is support measures by the region and incentives from the regional government that are needed for the regional companies, for local companies to transform their businesses. And I will just briefly show you a few slides from our work in the Sverdlovsk region, how we implemented that. So we identified key bottlenecks in the Sverdlovsk Oblast and realized what priorities are relevant for the region. And I also wanted to emphasize a few target parameters. Of course, I don't have enough time for the whole strategy, but I wanted to mention the strategic goal included in the concept of the green economy. And there are three important things here. Firstly, it's improving the life quality for the current and future generation. It's looking for a balance between the growing production volume and protecting the environment, and creating and developing measures of integrating the region in international markets with climate change. This is a very ambitious goal that the Sverdlovsk region is now pursuing, and this can be reflected in the region's place in various rankings, like the International Sustainable Development Ranking of countries and regions. So far, we've been discussing with the regions the ambitious goal of making it to the top quartile, to the top 25% of regions by the key environmental dimensions like air quality, water quality, efficient waste handling, consumption and industrial waste, and of course, importantly, the level of carbon intensity of the region's economy. And that's where I would like to finish and give the floor over.
Thank you very much, and we continue talking about the regions, and we have here a representative of the executive power, Igor Suvalov. Please tell us whether you are using ESG standards in your work on the regional level. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Yes, sometimes we follow the old patterns, but of course we look forward and we try to take into consideration the new technologies and the new know-how used both in technologies and management. And in general, public utilities sector is a very important thing for everyone. And to have central heating, to have water and electricity, that's an everyday thing you need in your life. And looking at the prospects of our development, we understand that tomorrow we need something new. We cannot use the old experience. And we supply central heating, water. We also deal with waste management, electricity supply. What ESG is doing over here? First, it is environmental protection and management of resources and providing for our population. So we have to look for new technologies, for new know-how to cut down on our costs. And that is one of the priorities, to economize. And that is why we have to use new technologies. My expertise is solid wastes, and we tried to put the wastes back into production and decrease dumping of solid wastes. And of course, it has a lot to do with environmental protection, but also with the social sphere. Because when we decrease the amount of solid waste dumped on our territory, we save a lot of land, and we have positive response from our population, support of local communities, and we try to use new technologies and decrease the dangerousness, the danger of these solid wastes. And the most important thing about solid waste is to decrease, if I may put it like that, production of these solid wastes. So we have to be developing in this direction. Together with our industry, we should manufacture goods without wastes, or with wastes which can be reprocessed. We do not need products which are impossible to process and we have to throw away and dump into some dumping sites. And our governor sets it as our priority. We have the necessary paperwork, we have the local legislation, the local programs of dealing with solid wastes. And these programs envisage a comprehensive, complex approach to dealing with the solid wastes and working with these wastes. We envisage creating technological parks which would allow us to maximize processing of the solid wastes, sorting and processing and reprocessing without additional use of primary sources of energy, primary raw materials. And that is all I wanted to say, and I'm ready and willing to answer questions. Thank you very much, and I think we will be able to ask questions by the end of our session. Our task right now is to give floor to all the speakers, and now I'm passing the floor to Sergei Litvinenko, who is responsible for waste management in the Ural Federal District. Can you give us a comment within 2-3 minutes? Can you add anything to what Mr. Svalov said about waste management and waste processing on the territory of our region? Yes, good afternoon, dear colleagues. We created a union, an association of waste management enterprises, and we created this union to research this issue. And we have conducted quite a lot of research within this past year. And we came to the conclusion that our industry has not been developing successfully due to several reasons. When Ksenia Klimko said, I agreed with that wholeheartedly, that there was a linear economy. And right now, it's very difficult to rearrange it to circular, to closed cycle economy. We should change a lot of legislation. We should conduct a comprehensive change of the legislation, and our oblast, our region, does not have enough capabilities to deal with our wastes. So our task is to accumulate positive experience and create this industry, basically a new industry of processing wastes. But we should be thinking about economic considerations so that it is profitable, it is viable for all stakeholders to work with the wastes and byproducts. Thank you very much for this comment. And we go from regional subjects to national and international levels. We have Svetlana Grishenkova here from the ranking agency, and your ranking agency was conducting ranking of ESG of different companies in Russia. How do you organize this ranking? Thank you very much for the invitation. I would like to share my screen with you to give you more information.
Видно презентацию, да?
Can you see my slides? Yes, everything works great.
Занимаемся тематикой ESG рейтингов и рэнкингов уже.
Yes, we conduct ESG ranking from 2017
К инициативе UN
when we joined different ranking initiatives and went further on
так и регионов.
and started ranking different companies and regions. We have regional ranking, ESG rankings for Russia, and the latest information will be issued this December.
Российских компаний, то есть это детальная оценка.
And you can find our independent ESG responses and reports concerning 155 Russian companies and a lot of foreign companies. Some of you may have seen it already. We have the ESG ranking of top companies
Мы уже
using the interpretive ESG ranking, and we publish it for a year
оценок.
on the basis of different assessments we have accumulated. Unfortunately, the green scope does not grow as fast as we would have wanted. There is a lot of red and yellow. Those are companies with not sufficient enough ESG policies. And there is, of course, environmental, social, government assessment. They are slightly different, but we try to balance them, coordinate them, depending on the industry, on the risks. And we assess policies and programs of the companies, their reports, and, of course, their efficiency in pursuing those ESG programs.
Рисков можно
Here we have environmental risks. We can understand here how these or those environmental risks are realized for different companies. For example,
портфель активов.
there is this large risk for portfolio. For these types of risks are not present, for example, for other industries. We are being very practical about ESG rankings. We try to make them useful for practical purposes. And there are different directions where you can use them. You can assess ESG risks when you are creating your own ESG strategy of the company, and you can raise awareness of all stakeholders. You can assess the logistics, and you can use at the instrument of finance and criterion for green exchanges. And when you also form your investment portfolio, and our partner bank already raised funds in German banks using this ESG ranking. When you have positive ESG ranking, you can have better loans. Coming over to regional issues, what is important for regions, we should understand that ESG risks and ESG opportunities are closely interconnected. ESG risks of the companies, manufacturers within the region, these risks can translate into ESG risks of the region as well. And ESG opportunities like using renewable energy, they can become a good incentive for businesses within the region. So ESG business is a strategic partner for a region which can help and promote the region and help the region to improve its environment, and they go over to clean technologies. They work out the different technological areas, and they use local markets. They improve local markets and create jobs for local people. And ESG responsible region is very attractive both for business and investors. For global companies which would like to organize some local manufacturing, they have it as their priority to include ESG into their agenda. And if there is financing of local programs of environmental protection, if there is program of incentivizing local ESG responsible financing, if ESG factors are used in public procurement within the region, and it is also important for the regions to be included into ESG rankings. For example, Lipetsk region, we've been assessing for 3 years already. We use simplified methodology, and for the region, it's assessment of sustainability, how sustainably the region develops and how well the region manages its environmental, social, and managerial risks and opportunities. So this ranking is a signal for investors and assessment of efficiency of the local authorities. I've got these methods described over here. I do not have time to describe it in detail, but I can send it to anyone willing to get acquainted with that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Svetlana. We have international participation here, and we have the president of the Saxon Academy of Sciences, Mr. Wiesmont. What do you understand? How do you understand circular economy in Europe? Because people understand it differently. How does your approach correlate with your approach? And how do we implement ESG principles? What differences do we have in implementing these principles?
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to this round table. It's a very interesting and a very important topic, of course. And as Shana already mentioned, the term ESG itself is not widely known in Germany, although Svetlana just referred to these green investments which get better loans. That's true, of course. But what we observe now is that as a consequence, many companies try to present themselves as ESG companies, as green companies. So we are not yet sure whether we are using the right indicators for ESG in this context, but that's a different topic. Xenia also mentioned that there are so many different concepts. So we are talking about circular economy, green economy, ESG, sustainable development, whatever. And I think alone for circular economy, there are more than 140 different definitions. So I think we should point out what we actually want. Otherwise, we don't know what we are talking about in the end. So as an economist, I usually prefer to use an academic definition, which is actually quite simple and quite clear. It means that a circular economy sustainably preserves the fundamental functions of the environment, namely to supply resources and to absorb and assimilate waste. And of course, greenhouse gases also belong to this possible waste. And that's what we have to do in a sustainable way. And of course, we should also observe here the social aspects of these transitions. And what does it mean in practice? In practice, it means that we should respect the waste hierarchy, actually. And Igor already referred to that. It means reduce waste, reuse, and recycle waste. And I'm very happy that Igor referred to reduction of waste in this context. And we should try to do it through appropriate designs of the products. So that's where we need innovations, many, many innovations and the steady streams of innovations. And we should also develop innovative recycling technologies and renewable energy sources. And of course, for the support, we need digital technologies. In order to realize this systemic change towards a circular economy, we also need, that's very important, also suitable business models, because businesses have to do this transition toward a circular economy. So what's happening in Germany right now? And so Germany, as you may know, has a long tradition in environmental technologies, in particular recycling and water treatment technologies. And now additional market opportunities, business models, are currently seen in areas related to energy transition and digitalization. So working towards greenhouse gas neutrality is a hot topic in Germany right now. And it is certainly one of the main goals, and further investments will be made in greenhouse gas neutral technologies. Again, with the explicit goal to promote prosperity, innovation, employment, and environmental protection. In the short term, Germany is withdrawing from the combustion of lignite and coal. Not all Germans are sure that this will work and whether we will not import nuclear electricity from nuclear power stations from France or from Czechia, from Czech Republic, or electricity from coal power plants in Poland, but we will see whether it works out or not. But anyway, there is a goal to withdraw from all fossil fuels. Consequently, there are now many efforts to further raise the share of renewable energy sources, to insulate houses, very hot topic, and business is very happy for these goals. And of course, to gradually switch to e-mobility. That's a construction of traditional internal combustion engine, for which Germany actually is, or at least was very famous, could be banned from 2035 or 2040, and various car manufacturers such as Volkswagen or also Mercedes are already focusing on the priority development of e-vehicles. Other aspects of a circular economy or a green economy, such as the waste hierarchy, are currently being shifted to the backstage, with the objective of climate neutrality being given absolute priority. Nevertheless, there are considerable efforts to extend recycling activities, which is often a profitable business under the given framework conditions that we have in Germany. So, but not everything is good. There are obstacles towards this development, and some critical obstacles hindering this development can be found above all in the not always predictable reaction of people to the introduction of new technologies. For example, it seems that motorist car drivers are not particularly happy with e-vehicles due to their limited range and the long time it takes to charge the batteries. Consequently, significant subsidies are necessary to attract sufficiently many buyers. Moreover, there is increasing resistance to more wind turbines and more transmission lines for electricity. But much more electricity from renewable sources is needed in order to reach the goal of climate neutrality. Another question that arises in this context is whether business companies, the business models, always have the right incentives to improve the environmental quality of their products. If a new environmentally friendly design promises higher revenues, then companies will certainly adopt such a technological innovation. If, however, revenues are expected to decline with a new model, this new design, although environmentally more environmentally friendly, is unlikely to be adopted. One must not forget that it is the companies that have the knowledge, not the government. New technologies sometimes help to change the perception of important concepts. This relates, for example, to sustainability. I don't know how many perceptions are of this concept, but also the waste prevention. Igor also referred to this a little bit, which is a priority goal of the waste hierarchy. Currently, it seems that innovative recycling technologies insinuate that waste recycling is synonymous with waste prevention. But of course, that's prejudice, because we all know that the more waste we generate, the more waste stays in the environment. So, and in terms of sustainability, almost everything is now declared sustainable. Sustainable agriculture, sustainable food, sustainable, I don't know what. So again, I'm afraid that similar things will happen with ESG and with green investments and things like that. And so we have to be careful. In summary, it can be said that Germany is particularly strong in implementing a circular economy when it comes to innovative technologies. However, weaknesses in the German approach also result from this focus on technologies. So reactions and behavior of consumers and manufacturers to these technologies needs to be taken into account more carefully. And in general, of course, in order to generate reasonable business model, it's necessary that the government sets the framework conditions. Because otherwise, in this environmental framework, we cannot expect that companies here will do everything, because they have to generate profits for their businesses, otherwise it will not work. So the government has to adjust the framework conditions which allow the companies, or which motivate the companies to do things which are environmentally reasonable and serious. Thank you very much.
Спасибо большое, господин Висмет.
Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. You said that it's necessary to change business models, and that is why I would like to invite the next speaker, how ESG companies work both in Russia and in the world. And the floor is given to Andrei Volchik from Ural branch of Sberbank. How the work of Sberbank promotes ESG work and how you help ESG companies. I cannot give you specific details, specific percentages of our loans and credits. It would be of more importance to understand what is happening inside the bank itself, inside our business processes. We've mentioned greenwashing several times. This is the situation when a company does not actually do anything, but would like to see as an ESG company, as a green company. So I would like to tell you how in Sberbank we try to implement ESG principles into our everyday activities, into our everyday processes, so that ESG becomes a matter of everyday life for us, rather than some additional extra work. First of all, we would like to correspond to the 4 global ESG trends which are understood in the society. The first priority is decarbonization and carbon regulation, and we know that companies undertake responsibilities on decarbonization, and the largest companies in 120 countries in many cities undertook these responsibilities. Second, we have to see to it that it corresponds to the transformation of financial markets. We see that endowments and foundations prefer to invest their money into ESG companies. About 3,500 funds do that. In Russia, there are few investors like that. So far, only 23 billion rubles are regulated by such companies. But 5 years later, I think it will be 1.5 trillion rubles. involved into transfers to ESG companies. One more thing which is very often omitted, we forget about ESG agenda, and that is demographic changes. We see that by the year 2050, on the one hand, there will be 2 billion more people on Earth, and on the whole, the population will be much older. And we should remember about social aspects. We should become more and more efficient. We should create more and more added value. But on the other hand, we should be more and more attentive to elderly people. And technological revolution, we invest up to 30% more into green technologies. And as any other company, we base our activities on our specific policies, and there are 8 directions of our ESG policy. We use the best practices which we analyzed in different countries of the world, which correspond to ESG agreements of the United Nations and other documents, but it's kind of empty words, but I will give you more details how it really works. And we have 8 major directions of our work. I will not go into all details, but I will tell you about 2 of them. First of them is development of managing the climate changes. As for the climate changes, we work with a lot of clients, and we are one of the largest companies in Russia per se. So we exist not only in the financial world, but in the real world as well. And we decided that all our new offices and refurbished offices will be saving energy and will be using as much renewable energy as possible. We implement recycling programs. For example, our plastic cards are recycled, and we plant trees. We planted 168,000 trees all over Russia, and we cut down on usage of paper. And we think we have saved 170,000 trees by saving paper in our work. And of course, our major activity is finance. Decarbonization, if it happens in 2070, then most likely we will have to invest about $100 trillion. And if we speed it up, by the year 2050, we will have to invest $143 trillion. And there is a lot of discussing whether it is going to be a barrier on the way of economic development. We see the assessments over here that despite the slight decrease of economy by the year 2050, 2060, we can see that every of these global players envisages the growth of GDP because there is this new global demand on new solutions, on new technologies, on new changes in production electricity. There appears this whole new industry of producing green hydrogen, and this will result in the growth of GDP. And our trend, as for Russia, it looks more like that of China. We are going down, and by 2030, just like China, we can even increase the emissions of carbon dioxide, but then we will be decreasing them. And now I will get back to Sberbank, what Sberbank is doing. First of all, loans and credits to corporate clients. All of our clients not only green clients or ESG clients working regionally, or if they work with socially responsible things. No, every client is assessed by three criteria: environment, social responsibility, and responsibility in corporate management. And our internal processes are created in such a way that, giving out hundreds of thousands of loans, we create ESG ranking of all our clients. It's a pilot project yet. It will be finalized by the end of 2021, and starting next year, this ESG ranking will be used for credit ranking, and that will entail different conditions, different percent, different rates of our loans. So ESG agenda has already been implemented into our business processes. Thus, it's not about one manager or one client. As well, for example, one company thinks of itself as green company, green client. No, we will be using objective data. The second the second direction of our work is retail, and we have created funds for investments and management of their portfolio, which is aimed at clients which have ESG rankings and who are green clients. But again, it's a two-way road. It's not that we only invest into such companies. No, we also offer that money to clients who are very responsible about their investments. And if we look at the data in the lower right corner, some of our investors say that they would like to invest into green technologies, and that's the kind of clients we offer for ESG investments. And when we talk about credits, loans, we have clients who specifically work in environmental protection in green areas, and we have, for example, wind turbines and solar electric power station, and we work with the water supplies very actively. There are several federal, municipal, and private companies dealing with water treatment, and we also have ESG credits, not only green credits, but ESG credits, and it's a larger market. We can give you a loan for any purpose, and apart from usual indices, they have to correlate to some ESG indices. For example, a company takes a loan for some technology, but also undertakes responsibility to, for example, decrease the emission of carbon dioxide, or maybe create jobs and keep those jobs. And if they perform, if they meet these requirements, then they have more favorable rates for their loans. We can give you examples of these loans, and that seems to be about it, and I'm willing to answer questions.
В российской промышленности металлурги и трубники являются одними из лидеров по объему зеленых инвестиций.
Thank you. And in the Russian industry, pipe producers are one of the leaders in this area. We have Denis Papin, Sustainable Development Manager at Pipe Metallurgical Company. So, Denis, are industrial companies already facing some requirements in terms of implementing ESG principles? Do consumers of your product such requirements to you? And since you are exporting a great volumes of your pipes, are you facing such requirements abroad, specifically in Europe?
Денис Сергеевич, вы нас слышите?
Dennis, can you hear us? Probably some connection problem. Yes, I heard your question. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I hope you can hear me well. It is indeed a very relevant question, a very topical one. There are currently right now we are facing some tectonic shifts, and the end consumers of our products, oil companies, are interested and they are defining their own sustainable development requirements. Over the past month, we've held several meetings with our colleagues from the oil industry, and we are discussing opportunities for the big business, for the metal companies. And in the future, oil companies, as far as I understand, are going to cascade these requirements down to smaller suppliers. This subject is also relevant for us because of the domestic requirements. Young people coming to work at our plants are not only interested in the salary, although that does matter, they're also interested in the environmental aspects and social programs and our efforts as a socially responsible employer. So this is a comprehensive story, and the pipe metallurgical company has turned 20 years this year. It's been a long way and many development steps, but everything proves that our company is sustainable and reliable. And over the past year, we've been interacting with investors, several big Western investment funds, and in order to use them, we fill in questionnaires with a broad review of our activities, environmental and social aspects and corporate governance. These are long questionnaires with 120, 140 questions, and this helps us develop actively looking into the future and realizing what still needs to be done. Speaking about our geography, our coverage, this is not only Russia. We are producing and exporting not only in the Russian Federation, we are also present in the foreign markets. We have assets in Romania, several pipe plants, and we are therefore monitoring the European taxonomy. We are interested in this trend of cross-border carbon tax adjustments. We are not just monitoring the news. We realize that a part of our export will depend on this trend, and we are looking into the future of this risk. Even though we look better than many other metal companies, I'd like to remind you that most of our steel is molten in furnaces, and we realize that we have this handicap compared to other metal companies. But still, this is a very relevant issue, and I hope that both the state and the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs will be monitoring this situation and represent the position of the Russian Federation in their interactions. I'd like to mention specifically our position in Russian regions in terms of sustainable development. Our company is present in the Rostov Oblast, in Volgograd, in Volozhsky, in the Chelyabinsk Oblast, and the Sverdlovsk Oblast. It's quite a big company. We employ more than 55,000 people, and in the past we were embracing this corporate social responsibility principle, but now ESG is being implemented by special teams created at the company, project management offices, so to say, and they are initiating different initiatives on environmental and social areas. They build roadmaps, and we are implementing sustainable development principles locally with our colleagues. So we are not just shaping ideas and concepts at the managing companies level, we have also cascaded that down. Pavel, I hope I've answered your question. Thank you very much, Dennis. Could you please say, are ESG principles are they creating any obstacles to your export nowadays? No, not really. I wouldn't say that. You know, a pipe is basically metal. In order to make a pipe, we melt metal and make pipes. So we are not facing any significant problems with the export. Our Russian assets have been involved in this sustainable development agenda for quite a long time. We have GRI reporting at our big company here, so we are not facing any significant challenges related to that at the moment. Thank you very much. So we have heard from an industrial company, and it's interesting how ESG transformation impacts the activity of an IT company. We have here corporate citizenship lead at IBM Russia and CIS, Irina Garth. So, Irina, what is the culture of ESG principles implementation at your company, and what solutions can stimulate sustainable development? Thank you, colleagues. I'm happy to join the discussion today, and of course, the words of our colleagues from Sberbank and TMK ring very true. I will partially disagree with the previous speakers, starting from what Jana was saying about the key role played in promoting and practicing this culture by the government. Of course, the government sets the rules, but let us not forget that besides the regulator and the external rules that are placing us in a certain position, we have, I believe, a no less important driver, and that's the company's DNA, its corporate culture, and how this impacts what we are doing. So I will just quickly mention numerous studies that exist in the market. One of them is a global study focusing on the Russian audience. Besides regulators, there are important stakeholders like our clients and business partners. And to them, the companies having responsibility, besides being responsible to its shareholders, the company is also responsible for the community and the environment where they are working and shaping around themselves. Being responsible for environmental aspects, being responsible to its employees and business partners. People value these types of responsibility just as much as business success. And business success and long-term sustainability of this business success is actually driven by these factors. And if we will look at the drivers impacting companies' brand perception, you can see that the majority of our speakers today were talking about the top driver, environmental consciousness, reducing our carbon footprint and so on. But these drivers are actually far more numerous. The drivers that affect how investors and business partners are thinking about us and building relations with us. I would like to refer to this driver that is being forgotten currently. But in fact, this whole balance should rely on all of these components. Speaking about IBM's experience, here we have a good standing actually, not only because digital technologies, as the colleagues have already said, have their own responsibility. And this year, IBM joined the European Green Coalition that brings together 20 companies, and this is about assuming responsibility, accepting responsibility for creating digital solutions that can have an impact. And we're a B2B company, and these solutions can affect environmental responsibility of other companies. So how does IBM deal with that? There are now lots of discussions about where ESG responsibility should be placed. You've mentioned that there have been more than 50 forums. lately, and they are all discussing where to land this responsibility. So we believe there shouldn't be a separate department or division in charge of that. And if we look at the global level and cascade it to the local level, so each of the departments is in charge of its own share of diversity and inclusion and human rights and environmental responsibility and social responsibility towards external communities. And this is incredibly important because it makes it possible for us to incorporate the ESG agenda basically in all business departments and processes and imbue their activities with this agenda. The trend I already mentioned, and we can clearly see this trend at this meeting, is that the focus is shifting towards the letter E, environment. And of course it is very important because it shapes our future. But besides the letter E, let's not forget about the letter S, social. And that's not only responsibility to our employees for creating the conditions that enable them to focus on their business process. It's also about the programs we are implementing for the wider external community. And I think they are still associated with the traditional corporate charity, which is totally wrong. And what IBM is doing in terms of developing social programs, all these programs have to do with the business strategy of our company and where our digital solutions are developing. And this is probably one of the recommendations. See how your business is working, what it is doing, and link your efforts to that. Focus is very important, and particularly if we're talking about small towns with one major employer, companies often want to help everyone at the same time. But if you focus, you will achieve the maximum social impact. Do not forget that you can support people financially, but also, and the COVID era has shown that clearly, expert support is very important. Even digitization that's happening at big companies, it's also on the agenda of most socially oriented non-profit organizations. And believe me, they are sorely lacking the expertise that the business already has and can share. Speaking about key metrics, as mentioned by the colleagues, KPI criteria, they are extremely important because they enable us to navigate the roadmap and see whether we are on schedule or not. There is a certain set of metrics like responsibility to our employees, and another set of metrics has to do with the corporate citizenship. Speaking about sustainability, it's very important to understand that metrics can also be divided into high-level metrics that we report in our numerous reports, and the metrics that are cascaded down to the level of our programs. As an example, digital solutions, we realize our responsibility very well for how ready young people are. Young people who are coming to our production, how ready are they going to be for dealing with digital technologies, how comfortable they feel about digital. And as for cascading down, for example, digital educational platforms created by our company help people get training, retraining, and professional development for students, teachers, people who lost their jobs, and so on and so forth. Going back to culture, how this supersedes everything and how it can be transmitted. So, for example, when we are teaching school students, college students, and teachers about cloud technologies, we're doing that not only from the technological perspective, but also from the perspective of how digital can impact the quality of medical services and people's well-being and climate conditions and so on and so forth. Everything we do is based on this essence, on these values. And of course, IBM has reporting, and we are often facing the question of how to repackage the existing reporting. Well, I'd like to say that simply repacking what we are doing, what we are continuing to do, that's not the right approach. Reporting can be relevant and useful if we are changing our practices, and reporting comes second. And the criteria, standards, and metrics that are listed in the reports and in rankings, they are more of a roadmap that enables us to transform what we are doing within ESG. This is the list of reports published by our company, not only GRI, not only corporate social responsibility reports. These are also a regular report on achieving sustainable development goals, reporting on lack of conflict of interest in use of minerals, and so on. In conclusion, the lessons and the principles we have defined for ourselves and that we are sharing. So ESG has to happen in all processes and activities of a company. There shouldn't be a single dedicated department if we want these practices to be sustainable. We are saying that we need this to happen all the time. It needs to be incorporated, mainstreamed in our mental processes of our employees. We need to train and retrain our employees, and the company has a huge platform in learning, and every employee must take a certain number of educational courses on this subject, on this platform. And also, as we were saying, a sustainable company is responsible for how it deals with its business partner and the supply chain, adjusting the values and practices to what it believes to be right in terms of ESG. I will finish at that. Thank you. Thank you very much, Irina. And we have one more. We have a representative of one more big international company, training and development director at Gazprom International, Rob Versma. Mr. Versma, how does a sustainable strategy impact the company and its relations with the investors? You used to work at Shell, so what's the difference between approaches to ESG transformation between these two companies?
Well, thank you so much for your invitation to speak on this conference. It is my pleasure to contribute to the discussion about ESG. And in my role as Director of Training and Development, International Training and Development for Gazprom, I support the knowledge sharing in all kinds of areas within Gazprom. Also, for instance, in organizing conferences for Gazprom about sustainability and about ESG. Best practices is very important to understand and to create better understanding about what our goals are. I also like to mention, coming back to what Shanna said in the beginning, she mentioned the millennials. And what I noticed is that they are not all aware about what is actually ongoing in this area. But not even the millennials, but also so much more people. I'm doing lectures on universities. And recently, again, I noticed that a lot of university lecturers have no understanding about the importance of this agenda. I also need to mention something else. The ESG agenda recently is kidnapped, or actually over the last period is kidnapped by climate change discussion. But I'd like to remind you that there are 16 other sustainability goals, which are highly significant and important for the future of the world, for a sustainable future. Think only about, for instance, the clean water policy. Only 2 out of 10 people in the world have access to clean water. And we don't want to talk in the Netherlands, for instance, about flushing toilets, but we need to understand that most of the people in the world don't have flushing toilets. So we're also talking about hygiene. I need to mention that I'm not talking only on behalf of Gazprom. I'm talking about my observations in the Netherlands and in Europe. And indeed, I'm a former Shell employee. Let me first and quickly go through some of the slides I collected for this conference. First of all, First of all, I'd like to tell you about Gazprom. And Gazprom has, of course, also adopted the sustainability goals of the UN, all the 17, and actually divided these in all kinds of targets. But more importantly is to understand, and that's what I noticed as well, that it is not about what your intentions are, your good intentions for the future, but the financial world is actually looking at you about what you achieved. And here you can see that Gazprom is taking it in two categories. More and more companies are doing this. My previous company, Shell, was not doing this. So they had a problem this year, as maybe you understand. They went to court, or actually they were got into court. They didn't want to go. And the judge in the Netherlands said, hey, Shell, you promised too less. You need to do more. Please provide the proof. And Shell was saying, well, we are in net zero emissions in step with society. And actually the judge is saying, that's not enough. This is actually coming from Shell, where they're actually powering progress. That's their sustainability program. Generating shareholder value is the first one, because they say we need to have money to create it. But for the public in the Netherlands, they didn't accept this. Even worse, ABP, a pension fund, that's a Dutch pension fund in the Netherlands, they withdraw their investments in Shell. 431 million euros. That's a lot of money. And it's not because of the lot of money for Shell, it's not a lot of money, but it is about the signal. So the pension fund was actually threatened to go taken to court by the pension holders. They were saying, we don't want you to invest in fossil fuels anymore. You can see what ABP has more in their fundings. They has also Gazprom, BP, ExxonMobil, Chevron, Petrobras, Lukoil, Novatek, Rosneft, Tatneft. They have a lot of investments in fossil, and actually they are going to withdraw. Is this important? Yes, it's highly important. Because more and more in the financial world, they're looking at what is your KPIs in the ranking about environmental performance index and other indexes. There are more of them. How significant is this? This is highly significant. My wife, she's an HR director in another company. She recently had to go to, explanations to the investors, to the analysts, financial analysts, about what are their plans, what did they achieved, and what are they up to. She was pretty nervous because she knows that if she's saying something wrong about hiring women, men, and people from other origin, or what the company else is doing, that this has a significant impact on their list, because they're listed on the market and the share price could drop if they would use the wrong words. So rankings are important. But just to remind you how important the ranking is in the investors, BlackRock is not so visible. The other party, which is a hedge fund, is more visible. So that's, I think it's called also something with rock and black. But this one, BlackRock, is actually positioning itself as an industry leader in ESG. Try to understand how important they are in the Netherlands. Only ASML, it's a semi-product producer of microchips, etc., 7.5%. In Unilever, 8%. They have shares, they have enormous impact. In the Netherlands only, they actually the biggest owner of the assets in the Netherlands, 313 billion euro. This is Larry Fink. Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock. This is what he's saying. He's writing a letter to everybody. He's saying, actually, you need to take action. And they are in power to force this action, because they are everywhere. They are shareholder of a lot of big companies. For instance, they own Shell for a bit as well, and they will withdraw their money if Shell is not keeping their promises. They set the agenda, as you can see, how to finance the net zero transmission in emerging markets. Something about ratings. Yes, this is coming from Moody's, and this is how ESG is actually going to be measured. It's about credit, and as already mentioned in some of the previous presentations, that the ratings are highly important. You're considered as highly important, or actually you're getting very money for cheap rate, or you're going to be seen as a risk taker. The fossil fuel world has a huge challenge in the future to meet up these ratings, because this is how the financial world is looking at it. Is the financial world becoming more and more important? Yes. I could say, you know, from my observation also in this conference, yes, there are clients who are asking for changes. Yes, there are employees who are asking for changes, but that is not sufficient. What I see is that the companies, like for instance, like Shell and others, they are listening much more to the ratings and the financial institutions. They can drive the change. They only need to take further actions. Thank you for my contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Wiersma. Please tell us how vulnerable the positions of Gazprom are in Europe. What is the place of Gazprom in these rankings?
It is very difficult for me to address Gazprom's position. I'm not in the position to explain this. But in Europe, we can see at the moment, for instance, in the Netherlands, huge discussions about fossil fuels, gas supply, and of course, also the position of Gazprom within this. This is a very sensitive discussion at the moment. That's all my comment.
Thank you very much. And I would like to pass the floor to a representative of academic research, an associate professor from Turin, Alberto Ferraris. Dr. Ferraris, one of the subjects of your research is sustainable business models. What are those models and how can we apply them to our country?
Yes, thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here. I heard a very, very interesting previous discussion about ESG and the implementation in the business processes and purposes. I am a professor of business management, so I try to give my perspective from my context, that is Italian context, but also from the perspective of how a business model may be sustainable and could add value to a company. First of all, I would like to share with you some important implication that we see in the Italian context. Compared to some years ago, we see that there is an increasing trend in obtaining, from the company's perspective, in obtaining some certification of ESG compliance, let's say. So we are seeing a lot of companies that try to be certificate from an external evaluator and that assess independently the possession of these ESG standards. This is very important because this certification can give both a competitive advantage on the market for the company and also that can give the access to some public funds that also with the European emission of money in our market could be very important for companies to upgrade and make this change in the sustainability journey. The other aspect in Italy is that we are seeing a lot of investment, in particular from funds from the European Union, on circular and sustainable business model. For example, in the academia, we see that we have a lot of funded position of PhD students that should collaborate with both universities and companies on this topic. So in the last years, this is very, very important change that we see in the Italian context. The second aspect is about business models. I think that the inclination of company to innovate business models is very effective process capable of aligning, creating value mechanisms and a sustainable approach. I think that, and here I prepared some slide, but I don't want to be so long in time, but a triple bottom line approach that consider stakeholder interest, including environment and society, as a key stakeholder of the company, should be really integrated in the company's core values. I have also some examples. We have one example from Carlsberg that integrate the sustainability component and base the business model on profit, for sure, because without profit companies cannot survive, but also purpose and planet. The CEO stated, brewing for a better today and tomorrow. We have also one Italian company that is famous worldwide, that is Ferrero, that embed in the core values of the company the sustainability aspects. And this is not something that is only on the paper, but this is the compass that drive all the employees' decision-making in the everyday life of the company. And this is a change in culture, as other guests has already discussed, that for me is very, very important. And I think that companies are doing this. Some, of course, are faster, but this is a crucial point in change of culture and leadership in the company. This is an example of the green fiber bottle by Carlsberg, and with the application of ESG related to this project, that is a great example in Europe of open innovation applied to sustainability approaches, because Carlsberg leverage on a heterogeneous and a very high number of partners to realize this project. We have many projects like Take Back to Recycle of Nespresso, that is an Italian company with a lot of history in Italy, leader in coffee related markets. And one of the most important project in the sustainability aspect is the project that is aimed to recycle materials by collecting the used capsules. So people can bring used capsule to one of the collection point, or to drop them off at the nearest Nespresso boutique, or fill the Nespresso recycling bag with used capsule. And there are many thousands of capsules that can be recycled. And this is also a competitive advantage of a company, because what I really think is that the point is here for companies is to create value jointly, not simply to create economic value and then donate part of this value for charity and so on. So many firms have reaped financial benefits by committing to sustainable business practice. And this is an important aspect that we have to take into consideration. Then we have an example from Lavazza, again, another company from my town, Turin, established more than 100 years ago. That is an example of regional development, because Lavazza Group is driven by a deep sense of responsibility towards all the community and the local context in which it operates. So there is a huge program of activities involving coffee producers, community, with the aim of creating shared value and positive social and economic and environmental impact. Then there is another example of how a company that is an Italian fashion brand that integrate in the value proposition, so that it is a great part of the business model. It is a Save the Duck is the name. It is a certified B corporation, the one that I discussed at the beginning of my speech. And Save the Duck create and deliver value for people and animals with a unique value proposition, that is this one. High quality products that respect the environment, and above all, does not involve the mistreatment of birds. It is a real competitive advantage on the market, and this company is getting a quite good market share base the business model on this aspect. Another example is of circular economy. Rifolab is the first brand in Italy that produce clothing with recycled materials and offer service to people to dispose of their old clothes. This is another industry where that is more interested in these changes. I have another circular economy example that is very famous also in Europe. It is Too Good To Go. That is in the food industry. It is the world's leading platform that connect customers to restaurants and stores that have unsold food surplus. This is the number that you can see. In particular, the customers can buy surplus food at much lower price than normal in a kind of magic box. And at the same time, we have a win-win-win solution that is, again, based on an innovation or changes in the business model. It is called circular business model, and in Italy we are seeing many effort and many attention on this aspect. I don't want to be so boring, and I want to leave space to the other guests, but this is, in our view, 4 steps that companies can adopt to change and innovate business model towards a more sustainable business model. The first part is to expand the business model canvas, and you can explore potential impact of ecosystem dynamics and issues on your business model. You can develop a more rich understanding of broader stakeholder ecosystem in which the company operates, and of the environmental and societal issue that might affect this ecosystem. So a wider view of the stakeholder analysis that we used to do in company. And then you have the second point is to innovate for a resilient business model. So then you must transform your business model, or even imagine a new one, so that you can seize these opportunities that come from the preliminary analysis. And you have to innovate and develop new aspects of the new business models. So you have to bypass current constraints, break trade-off, deploy technological advances, because, for example, digital technologies can help a lot in innovate the business model towards sustainable aspects. The third step is linked to drivers of value and competitive advantage, because, of course, again, we have to find a business model that also makes profit for companies. This is very important for sure. And the fourth one is to scale this initiative. And again, here the role of the ecosystem, so to look for new partners, to engage new people in the company across the supply chain and the company's networks is fundamental. And again, new digital technologies can help in these aspects. So the idea is that it is not possible to innovate the business model towards a more sustainable one without the changes, strong changes in culture and leadership that also other guests already highlighted. So thank you for the attention. If you have any questions, and also if you want to contact me, this is my email.
Thank you, Mr. Ferraris. Could you please tell us whether you research, whether you study the activity of Russian companies, ESG transformations in those companies? Do you research them at all? And what place does it play in the world?
This is a good question. Thank you very much. The idea is to carry on also with Professor Belayeva in the future a cross-cultural analysis in this direction. So to compare to different cultures like the Italian one and the Russian. I think that is an important issue because culture, again, is an important driver of these changes. So the idea is to carry on with Russian companies and Italian companies a cross-cultural analysis also in how they approach and to develop a new sustainable business model.
Thank you, Mr. Ferraris, for very interesting examples of European companies. And we have here the General Director of the Ural Exhibition Center, Mr. Danilov. Today we've heard about ESG transformation in industries, in banks, and how do you promote ESG agenda in this exhibition area Yekaterinburg Expo. What requirements do you have to meet? Good afternoon, dear participants, dear colleagues. We are not a large international company, yet ESG transformation is our business as well, and I can give you specific examples. One of the directions of our work, and we think it is very promising, is international events and hosting such regular international events on our venue. This is very promising direction of our business, and every application we prepare, every application for an international event has a separate section concerning environmental protection and concerning ESG agenda. For example, here are the requirements we have to comply with. For example, comprehensive environmental policy, and it is of utmost importance where we have this venue. For example, if our city corresponds to the sustainable development goals and our venue should have green status. We don't have it yet, but we are working in this direction. We are in the very beginning of this process. Together with the Ural Federal University, we've been preparing an ESG strategy of transforming our venue. So what we've done today and what we already include into our applications. First, internet advertising, all those internet advertising, everything is done without paper, and we have electronic tickets. So we try to save on paper in all, both advertising materials and other materials. We include smart technologies and we cut down on heat and energy consumption. As for catering services, we try to manage wastes and try to organize food for our guests in such a way that it minimized the wastes. And we have implemented the system of separate collection of wastes, and we did it back in 2019. So what would we like to focus on in our case? The most important, that it is a not long-term perspective, is not something we are going to do. No, it's something we've been doing already. And one of the major thoughts that occurred to me, we are a B2C company, and lots of people go to our events, go to our exhibitions every day. So when we are ESG transformed, those people will be able to see on our example how it works. And I think that will be a very significant contribution into the development of culture, both of our guests and of our region in general. That's what I wanted to say. That's what I wanted to share. Thank you very much. And do you have a green value over here? Is there a green value among the exhibition centers in Russia? No, not yet. But the largest European venues do have such certificates. For example, the venue in Vienna has that certificate, and it's a very practical question, a very practical issue when you are preparing for any international event. And for us, it's already a necessity. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. That is all as far as presentations are concerned, but we also have some questions from our viewers, and there is a question to Sberbank. Could you answer, if you have this information, in which industry your clients are the greenest? Who of your clients are the greenest? In which sector of economy? I can say who are the least green. The least green are those who are connected with fossil fuels. But as for the greenest, I'm afraid I cannot give you specific data. No, I cannot give you specific information. Then the question to different industries and enterprises, whoever is willing to deal with that question. What should we start with? How can we start ESG transformation at a plant, at an enterprise, for this transformation to be most efficient? Who's willing to answer? Mr. Papin? Thank you very much for this extraordinary question. Well, can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. So, first of all, you have to specify your objectives. You have to understand your goals and objectives. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No, unfortunately, we cannot hear you. Can you? Maybe somebody else could say, I seem to have some issues with connections. Somehow people who are online can hear him, but unfortunately, we cannot hear you. I can hear you well, and I can hear Denise, but there must be us can hear you perfectly well. Then we have a request. Shall we continue talking or shall we wait until this technical issue is resolved? That's when digital technologies are competing with sustainability.
Я не знаю, нас слышит аудитория, или мы здесь в изоляции?
Ирина, попробуйте еще раз, пожалуйста, сказать. Нет, не слышно. У нас слышно, да?
Вообще очень жалко, что мы не слышим комментарии от Ирины, потому что кроме того, что Ирина очень известна своими принципами внедрения не только в компании IBM, но и вообще на территории многих стран. И недавно был конкурс, но я себе позволю отметить, что Ирина как раз там заняла первое место по внедрению.
Took first place for implementing ESG into Russian enterprises. Can you hear me now? Unfortunately, we do not have feedback. Irina, I can hear you, and as far as I understand, our colleagues cannot hear us. Dear colleagues, then we will have to finalize our event, and I would pass the floor to Zhanna Biляeva for the final word. Dear colleagues, unfortunately, when we talk that in the year of 2021 we are brilliant with those internet technologies and we should use our skills and work out our skills in terms of sustainable development. Sometimes I think it's not like that, because we do have this sustainable mentality, but sometimes we fail to deal with computer technologies, like right now. And I would like to summarize some things. It's great that we gave floor to different groups of stakeholders, to all groups of stakeholders, and we've seen different approaches. And to me personally, this diversity, these differences in approaches seemed very important. I asked provocative questions and we heard not enough. We did not hear much about people within the process of transformation. And it seems to me that if we look at the volumes of social investment, Russia is not in the top 5 in the world, but the number of socially responsible investors in Russia increased by a factor of 20. And today, Mr. Versma spoke about the new force of these investment funds, investment foundations, which shape the agenda. Everybody starts with the green investments, social investments, and then go hydrogen and brown investments. And in the regions, we have carbon test grounds. It's a new trend for Russia. It's also an environmental thing, but it has a financial aspect as well when we talk about the quality of financial management. And on the exchange, stock exchange in Singapore, there is already trading in those units of energy. And right now we have social bonds. For example, Sberbank participates in that, and Russian railways participate in that, Sinara participates in that. They are the first companies participating in such social projects, and it's very interesting to witness how these social transformations will influence the market. And I would agree with Irina. Last week, there was the question, who are the drivers of the agenda? Yes, maybe the government does that. Throughout the world, the state, the federal authorities start doing that. And in Russia, within the last 15 years, it was business. Mostly these 50 companies, well, now 100 companies, which have been developing this agenda. And we had people from different companies that developed this agenda. And a lot of innovations were implemented by business. So business is doing the most impactful things. And what's the difference between social investments, impact investments? We have this diversity of opinions on what is what, and that is why sometimes the agenda is not quite clear. I think we do have some social investments, but we are coming closer to impact investments. And of course, it's not philanthropy, it's not charity, it's about new values in business, which allows business to create new business models, both aimed at getting profit and aimed at working with the local community. And as a representative of the Ural Federal University, I'm proud to say that we educated about 500 ambassadors of sustainable development, and we invited both Russian and foreign students to our summer schools, and we invited businesses. And what we have achieved, we're proud that we're here in the center of the Urals, in the heart of Russia, right on the border between Europe and Asia. And when students came to us for the first time, they didn't even know what large companies we have in the Urals, and they had no idea what social projects are implemented over here, ESG projects, and now we know that 175th anniversary of Sberbank has been celebrated. And even then, we discussed startups and sustainable development projects, not only environmental projects, but technological ones, and projects aimed at raising awareness of elderly people and of students. When we prepared our report, how involved our stakeholders, the university stakeholders, are into the sustainable development agenda, unfortunately now they about 55% are conscientiously involved, and we do not know how to calculate the impact, the effects. So I like the idea of promoting our exhibition center as the driver and the promoter of changes. And of course, there's going to be a lot of difficult questions because people are not happy about QR codes. And when they are asked to be certified like green or what, but now it works in different countries of the world, especially in the economically developed countries. And the next objective is to create the environment, the whole ecosystem. There are different rules, different regulations, and we should look at the rankings of regions, and we'd better be not only in top 25, but we should also look at the quality of the social capital, because our institutions of higher education and our students, our graduates, sometimes can have brilliant careers, and their mentality already allows for sustainable business models. So we hope that in the nearest future, the transformation is going to be not only through some program indices, but through systemic changes as well. So I would like to be very optimistic about that, and that's how I would like to end our discussion. We should not be frightened about differences of approaches to ESG transformation, because very soon the federal authorities are going to regulate everything very thoroughly. And let's be very optimistic about this. Thanks a lot to all participants. And later on, we will issue a large article in the journal Expert Ural. Thank you very much and goodbye. Thank you for invitation.
Thank you.